You understand the point of this rally.
Absolutely.
There is a sentiment here, certainly among those who put it together, and many of the 10,000 who are here today, that we want to get the Congress of the United States, Senate and the House, to basically vote no on the Iran nuclear accord. There are many people who are saying that that is not politically feasible. It may be, it may be the right sentiment to have, but in realpolitik, it's a done deal. Now, you have been in the halls of government, albeit in Canada. I first want to ask you, to what extent do you think it's realistic that there is still an opportunity to move Congress to vote against the accord and to have enough votes in the American Congress to override a presidential veto? What's your instinct on that?
Well, my instinct is, I say as a parliamentarian, that very often parties follow the leader of their party, and that's why many Democrats may feel obliged to follow Obama's lead. But at the same time, parliamentarians, and this is true of people in Congress, have an open mind and must have an open mind, and therefore have got to consider the facts, the consequences, the future. And I think that when we look at this agreement, and one thing that we have not really looked at enough, and that is, while the P5+1 negotiations were going on, they were not only overshadowing, but sanitizing the massive domestic repression in Iran. Iran, which was executing more people per capita than any other country in the world before the negotiations, has actually intensified those executions. In addition, they've escalated their domestic repression, the criminalization of dissent, the prosecution and persecution of ethnic and religious minorities, particularly the Baha'i. Over 1,000 political prisoners. I can go on. The reason I say this is because the Iranian leaders have been lying about the fact that they've been engaged in this repression. They've said there's been no repression of dissent. If they can lie so openly about what is so clearly, by all evidentiary, indicate a massive domestic repression, what does this say about the validity, let alone the veracity, of any of their undertakings regarding the nuclear agreement? And so I think Congress people have got to look at the overall situation, not only the Iranian nuclear threat, but the terrorist threat, the hegemonic threat, the incitement threat, and in particular the massive domestic repression. In other words, the fivefold threat that Iran represents. And if you look at it through this fivefold looking glass, I think that Congress people will say, hey, maybe we better look at this deal and say, can we really authorize it? Because at the end of the day, it will not only be Iran as a threshold nuclear state, but Iran as a threshold nuclear domestic repression nuclear state. That we cannot abide by.
It concerns me, and I'm just talking to you now, it concerns me that the discussion on the American scene, everywhere you look, whether it's at this rally or certainly when the administration talks about the deal, there is no nuance to it. There's no subtlety to it. There's no discussion of the vast repercussions, and nobody is forcing the president to address this. Why is that? And, as you answer that question, I want to throw one more into you. You know these people. It's hard for me to believe they're bad people. They have a vision. They think they're doing the right thing. How can they be so mistaken from your perspective? So talk about how we discuss it in America, and why do you think the president has in his heart the best of motives and is just mistaken?
Look, you can be very well-intentioned, but it can lead to very adverse consequences. It can be a present-day version of the March of Folly. This can be another March of Folly, and that's why Congress has got to take a serious look. When President Obama says that those who are opposing it are those who wanted to support the war in Iraq, that those who are opposing it are those that would oppose any diplomacy. Well, let me say, I oppose the war in Iraq. I'm in support of diplomacy. I was in support of this initial diplomatic encounter with Iran, but I cannot support this particular diplomatic
because
it makes all the things that Obama says, and I want to take him at his word, that he cares about and wants to achieve. It makes all those things harder to achieve, and in fact makes a lot of things that he may not be addressing. As I said, the massive domestic repression, just one of them, making those things worse.
He tells us, Irwin, that this deal will give us more insight into the nuclear program that Iran has, will stop it from developing nuclear waste that would be used for a nuclear weapon, that 10 years from now we will know much more than we do now and be in a better position to stop Iran, which still will be a signer of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that therefore this deal, he tells us, will in fact prevent Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. What would you want to ask him, or what would you say in response?
I would say, I'd like to believe you, but I have also heard what President Rouhani has said, and he said that the Americans initially only wanted us to have 300 centrifuges. We now have 6,000. They didn't want us to maintain our nuclear infrastructure. We're maintaining our nuclear infrastructure. They wanted to have inspections anytime, anywhere. Well, there are not going to be any inspections anytime, anywhere. So I just listened to what Rouhani is saying. He is the best proof of the fact that all of the U.S. red lines have been violated, and all the red lines of Rouhani, by their own acknowledgement, the Iranians' own acknowledgement, have been secured. That's what worries me.